I'm thinking of doing that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be that big a deal in my house. It's so little.
You're saying to move everything out and do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can move it into the barn. And we could even...
Rob's free next weekend.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Rob Watzak, Digital Brand Manager.
Hello.
Brian Pontalillo, editor's editor.
Hey, everyone. Whatever.
And our producer, Jeff Rose.
It is a lot like being on a job site working at Fine Homebuilding. You know, one day you're kind of ordering people around. The next day you're sweeping the floors. we're just all doing what needs to be done.
That's great to see you guys. I really appreciate your coming by last minute. I usually try and give my co-hosts at least a couple days notice, but today I sprung this on them because I'm trying to go on a photo shoot tomorrow. We'll see how that goes. The weather is kind of iffy. But what have you guys been working on around the house? Brian, you got some big news.
Well, maybe.
Uh-oh. Is there a wrinkle?
No, there's not a wrinkle. I shared with Patrick earlier that we found actually a condo to buy that we're kind of excited about, which was a big surprise because we weren't looking at condos at all. And we decided to kind of change the geographical area that we were looking for places, and this was one of the. Well, we were looking at a home, detached single family home, and it sold really fast, but it had brought us into this new area in South Carolina that we were interested in checking out more, and we ended up finding this condo, and it's really great for all of our needs right now, and. So I'm still excited about it, and everything is moving along. But you all know what it's like to get through the process of buying a place.
It sucks completely.
It's not a fun process. So once you have that offer accepted and you have contract and all of that kind of stuff, you still got to deal with the bank and the lawyers and the appraisals, and so
home inspector.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'll believe it when we're moving our stuff in.
Do you have a home inspection on a condo? Is that work like it does with a single family home?
You certainly can. And it's sort of up to you how you want to do it. This is all new to me, not having ever lived in a condo before or thought I was ever going to live in a condo. But the condo association is responsible for everything from the drywall out. So they're really responsible for everything but, finished materials and your possessions. So that
seems like a great arrangement to me.
Yeah, so you can have an inspection, right? But if there's a problem, if there's some rot in the roof framing or something that's discovered down the road, it's not yours to fix anyway.
So right, but you could choose not to live there if the roof is going to start leaking on your bed.
Absolutely, you could. And so I'm doing sort of we've decided to do some sort of limited inspections. We're definitely having even though again it's not sort of the owner's responsibility. We're having like termite inspection done and whatnot.
Can you put a blower door and do your own blower door test if you wanted?
I don't want to know what the blower door results would be in this place. Yeah, but it's actually it really feels like an excellent place for us right now. And like I said, just a big surprise because I like projects and I like working on my home. Obviously, people who listen to this podcast went through a lot of remodeling projects with me many years ago with the last home we owned. But right now, with some of the life things we have going on, this seems like a great choice for us. So,
I wish you success, man.
I've got an excellent partner who's open to me buying. She said, "You can buy a house down the road if you want to remodel something." Mm-hmm. So she's like totally willing to indulge my
need to tinker.
Yeah, my need to do that kind of stuff.
I think it's where you are a good option, especially if you can't. Who can buy a house right now? It's impossible, it seems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Rob, what have you been doing?
Actually, I just want to ask Brian a quick question. You got to let us know if and when this all resolves. Like Connecticut, it's like what is it, like 50 pages of documents you have to sign when you buy a house. There has to be like a lawyer there or two lawyers sometimes. And meanwhile, my brother-in-law in Michigan said it was like buying his first house was about as the same as going to DMV and registering a car. And so I'm just curious to see what the difference is, down where you are. I know I'm sure it differs a lot from state to state, but
yeah, so far it still seems pretty involved, Rob. I mean, we have a lot of details to take care of, and a lot of things that that the bank needs to kind of check off their list. And so interesting to me that the whole process is so interesting to me. I had my last mortgage with the same bank that I'm getting my mortgage from, which is the same bank that I do my banking at. But when you're applying for a mortgage, they treat you like they've never heard of you before.
Yeah.
My bank.
It's not personal, Brian. It's business.
Oh no, I get it. I just think it's so cumbersome that my bank needs me to provide their own statements back to them.
I know. I think the bankers just need a folder that measures a certain thickness for them to get approval from their loan officer, whoever it is. What have you been working on, Rob?
Well, I mean, I've talked to you about that basement floor that various
You're not
people
done with
had.
that yet.
Well, no. What I was going to tell you is that's not what I was working on. I wrapped that up, but it's starting to get warm and humid, and I have noticed that my basement is not as damp as it normally would be this time of year. So
Cool.
It was a very expensive experiment, but it seems to have paid off.
Great, and it makes, even more importantly, a good space for you to use, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm already filling it up with stuff, but it's another story. But other than that, I think I told you we were contemplating digging a small plunge pool in the backyard.
I do remember that.
I know I got that seemed like another one of those projects of mine that you were a little skeptical of.
What makes you think that, Rob?
Oh, I don't know, but I don't know. We were looking into it, and I had sort of a number in my head of what I thought it might cost, just sort of rough guess, because I was doing a lot of labor myself and trying to come up with a simple system using like a slab and block construction. And then when I got the zoning permit, but then when I was going to the building permit, I'd seen so many examples of pools built this way. I didn't really think about the fact that every single pool has to have an engineering stamp on it. So I was like, oh, well,
really?
I don't. Yeah. So when you buy a kit or a pre-made pool or a pool from a pool company, they're taking care of all that for you. So it's not something that would have been a hurdle that I couldn't have gotten past, but it was just getting late in the season, and it was starting to add more and more expenses to the project that I hadn't anticipated. And I finally kept inching up there. So we decided to hold off for now, but I found some other alternatives that might work out. I mean, part of the problem was I would have bought a kit pool to do an in-ground pool, but like the earliest I could get one with the demand the way it is right now was September. So I might actually still consider that and order something to be putting in next spring. But in the meantime, the initial money that we had set aside to start this project, we went and ordered a $600 inflatable hot tub.
There you go.
So that'll hold us over for a year, maybe.
I think that's a great solution for the short term. All I can think about, Rob, when people want pools and spas is the electrical consumption. I went to a seminar one time to look into getting PV panels put on my roof. And the woman who was representing the PV company was looking at people's utility bills to see if they were their ideal candidate. They want people who use lots of juice. And they look at your bill, and the guy in front of me in line was showing her, and she's like, "You have a pool?" And he's like, "Yes, I have a pool. How did you know?" And she's like, "Well, I can tell your electricity use triples during the summertime months when you're using the pool and running the pump." And that's all I'll never be able to have a pool with a good feeling about it, knowing that.
Well, I mentioned to you that I was looking into solar pool pumps, and I found a couple of places that sell kits for a DC, like 72 volt DC half horsepower pool pump that would have been sufficient for this size pool, because that's just a tiny little pool that I was going to build. I have not talked to any of the people at those manufacturers yet to see how viable they are. But the thing is, you don't run a pool pump 24 hours a day. So if there's enough solar exposure in the daytime, and you also grow mold when it's sunny, not when it's less so when it's cloudy. So it might actually be kind of an interesting symbiotic relationship between the solar exposure and the need for the pump to be running. It's something I'll definitely be doing research into. So if anybody has experience with that that's listening, please share your feedback with us.
That's an interesting segue, because speaking of stored solar energy, I cut up all the cordwood that I had cut from that log that was standing in my yard, borrowed our neighbor's log splitter, and did that over the weekend with Liam's help. And I ended up with so if anyone wants to know how much cordwood is in a 24-inch diameter, 20-foot tall oak log, it's about 2 face cords or a whole cord. So if you're doing your firewood calculations, there you go.
Cool. How's your back feeling?
That wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
The rounds were huge. You know, a 2-foot by 18-inch tall round of oak is got to be hundreds of pounds, right? But somehow I didn't get hurt. You have to only pick up half of it, right, at a time, and kind of roll it.
Yeah.
Physics is your friend. What's that?
That physics is your friend.
Yeah. And I put the splitter in the vertical mode, so you don't physically have to pick the round up and put it onto the carrier. You just slide it, roll it under it. And then last weekend was an even more challenging project. Carol's friend gave her a 6x8 greenhouse kit. And these things cost, a few $100. I looked, I think it was like $650 you could buy one of these things for. So as you might imagine, it's a lot like IKEA furniture, except it's got, instead of dozens of parts, hundreds of parts. And it took all the intellectual capacity I had to put this thing together, because the folks had started to put it together and then abandon it. So it was a basket case of greenhouse parts.
So what held the clear panels into that? Because a friend of mine had a smaller version of the similar kit to what I saw on your deck there. And he said that the panels were not held in by, I don't know if he was missing parts, but he made some sort of elaborate wood frame because the panels seemed to fit really loosely inside the aluminum channels.
Well, that's the keys to the kingdom of the whole thing, right? And they fit in aluminum extrusions, and they're locked in at the bottom at the eave side with these like little metal clips, and then there are plastic clips that screw into the aluminum extrusions that kind of hold the metal clips in place. It's all very minimalist in its construction, but it seems to work if you have all the parts. And I screwed it to our deck, as you observed, because I'm sure that you would have to live in a part of the country that has absolutely no wind. Is there a place like that? I think it would blow away. It has to be fixed to something.
For sure. Yeah, that's another thing. You were talking about the weight of trees and how people underestimate that. I think people also underestimate when you have a surface area of something, if doesn't have sufficient mass, how easy it is for the wind to move it.
Anyone who's tried to carry a sheet of plywood or rigid insulation in a breeze will tell you how much pressure is exerted on that.
In like a gentle breeze too. You can be carrying a sheet of plywood, everything's going just fine, and the only reason you notice the breeze is because all of a sudden you can't hold that plywood any longer.
Right, because you're being blown off course.
One of the dumbest things I probably ever did was I had to work on a second floor deck one day, and I was there by myself. And I could not move the material through the inside of the house. So I was trying to move sheets of plywood for temporary work surfaces up to that second floor deck. And it was like one of those days where there's a little bit of a breeze and then it's calm, and a little bit of a breeze and then it's calm. And I had to kind of time it just right to get up there without the thing being ripped out of my hands.
I've heard of all kinds of people getting really seriously hurt. And I know Mythbusters tested, could you hold it horizontally then and then slow your descent? And the answer is no. It just lands on your head. So you're better off getting it away from you. So we got some great feedback as always. This comes from Kathryn. Kathryn says, Dear FHB podcast, I was listening to episode 344 and kept wanting to chime in over and over again. I hope you will permit me my commentary. I apologize for any lack of editing as I'm pressed for time. I agree with the letter writer who commented that energy efficiency isn't a great reason to switch your oven and range. He's correct that grid electricity has to consume fossil fuels to create electricity, which is then used in an oven. So there's an additional energy conversion step in electrical ovens that natural gas ovens and ranges don't have. However, when it comes to the cooktop, induction is actually more efficient than you might think because it heats the pan directly rather than heating a gas of some sort, which then heats the pan. That being said, cooking is such a tiny percentage of overall energy consumption in a home, about 1/10 of that for space heating or water heating, that it's not a good reason to avoid electrifying everything else, nor is it a good reason to keep your natural gas line. Another letter writer commented on the high temperature of roofs due to solar heat gain. He's totally correct that roof temperature can get extremely hot, up to 150 degrees Fahrenheit, which makes insulating the roof more important than it would seem just by looking at outdoor temperatures. This is why there's an entire cool roof program which uses light-colored paints to reduce roof temperatures. The science of this always blew my mind. There's a reason that roofs and natural gas or liquid natural gas tanks are light colors instead of shiny metal. Shiny metal has lower absorption of solar energy, but it has lower emissivity of thermal energy. This means that white paint absorbs more energy than shiny aluminum, but it re-emits it even more energy, which is why it remains cooler and why metal slides are so darn hot. Solar energy is predominantly at a different wavelength than thermal infrared, which is why this happens. Finally, how can you find a good contractor without word of mouth? Try Consumer's Checkbook, checkbook.org, where subscribers rate contractors and other service providers, and no one is paid for higher rankings. This is a service you have to pay for, but that's what makes it hard to gain. Not a building performance expert, Kathryn.
That's interesting that she brought up the cool roof
I agree.
movement, and we covered that a while ago in Fine Homebuilding, and I had kind of I hadn't paid attention to it for a while, and then last year at some point I got pitched a story about from a regular contributor of ours, Fernando Ruiz, and anyway, he pitched me a story for GBA about the effectiveness of cool walls, and I was skeptical at first about that story. Because it just seemed like a strategy that might have sort of not that I doubted the efficacy of cool walls, but that it would be of minimal benefit was where my doubt came into play. But I trust Fernando a lot with his research and reporting, and he wouldn't have pitched it to me if he wasn't already onto a good story. And he certainly turned in an article really packed with data, and there's been a lot of study of this, and now there is a cool wall movement that is exactly what she was speaking about, just on roofs, just for similar treatment for walls, and very specific materials being developed now to meet those needs.
I might have worked on that feature, at least in some capacity or whatever. And what I found most interesting about cool roofs is they often don't cost any more than regular materials. Like it's something that is very easy to perform much better than conventional roofing materials.
Sure.
So thanks very much for that, Kathryn, and thanks for listening. This comes from Brian. Hi, podcast. I've been enjoying both of your podcasts on Pro Talk. It has been especially interesting to hear from people such as Sue Wadden, who so clearly really enjoy doing what they are doing. Keep up the good job. A few weeks ago, you asked for listeners to report about the price of construction materials. Yesterday, I purchased some pressure-treated lumber for a small deck I'm building. I don't want to start up the patio versus ground-level deck discussion again. but it is a ground-level deck, and hence why I needed a bunch of PT. I almost dropped the phone when the salesperson at the lumberyard said that I was over the $1,000 price limit for phone orders. The deck is only 6 by 20, and I'd already purchased the framing lumber separately. A single 20-foot PT 2x4 is now $30.14, plus 9.75% sales tax and 1% lumber tax, whatever that is. What is that? Have you guys heard of lumber tax? I think this is a California thing.
Yeah.
I also needed a couple sheets of half-inch PT plywood, $88.37 each before tax. I'm located in El Cerrito, California, just outside of San Francisco, so I'm used to higher prices for most things, but this is getting quite ridiculous. Take care, Brian. Thanks, Brian. Rob, you've been posting your regular trips to Home Depot and the escalating price of Advantech, as I recall.
I haven't been to Home Depot in at least a week or two, so I haven't done any updates. But the weird thing is, like, it's weird to see what things are cheap and what aren't, because it's not just across the board. Like, my dad today was talking to me about some project he was working on. He's like, "Oh, you should just get these pressure treated 5.5-inch wide fence pickets that they sell at Home Depot for like $1." And I'm like, $1 for a fence picket? It was $2.18 for a board that was 6 feet long, pressure treated, and 5/8 inch thick and 5.5 inch wide. And it's just, I guess it's just really cheap pine, but then you pay it by a pressure treated 2x4 for $30. Well, this long one.
I thought I was reading that wrong. Honestly, I thought it was $9.75 because that was the sales tax. It's like, that blew my mind. So no projects around here I can say until I get some more salvage material from something else. So Jeff, we have a special treat. One of our listeners recorded her feedback. Would you mind playing that?
Hi everyone, Fine Homebuilding is my favorite podcast, and I thought I'd share one of our 2020 projects. My husband and I renovated our master bath ourselves. I heard you discussing on a past episode about curbless showers, and I wanted to give some insight into how our curbless shower install has performed. It has a linear tileable drain and no door, just one 29-inch pane of glass to protect the vanity. As for the tileable linear drain, we installed it against the back wall. Our situation is such that installing the drain at the entry was not an option, as the shower is not located in an alcove. We finished the project in November 2020, so we've had a bit of time to test the drain. We haven't had any issues with the drain clogging. My husband and I both have long hair, and it's not very difficult to remove the drain for cleaning, though you do need to be careful when you're taking out the drain cover, as you could scratch surrounding surfaces if you're careless. It's pretty heavy since it's covered in tile. I believed you had a listener have issues with the drain at the location of the shower entry. I can't recall the episode, I'm sorry. But ours, located against the wall, is functioning just fine without any problems. We clean the drain about every 2 to 4 weeks, and it only takes a few minutes. We also have a freestanding tub next to, but not inside the shower. You have concerns highlighted in episode 285. Like the podcast mentioned, I was also concerned about water possibly making its way down between the tub and the floor where it shouldn't be. So we just made sure the shower pan was pretty sizable, which is 48 by 60 inches. So water had the best chance to flow into the drain rather than to the flat tub area. We utilized wall-mounted faucets caulked under the tub just on the side facing the shower, and kind of haphazardly caulked and waterproofed around the tub drain pipe as best as possible. As it is, water rarely even splashes near the tub, and I can't honestly see any bulk water getting under there with normal use. Since we do not have a door to the shower, just one pane of glass to protect the vanity, in planning for the situation, we waterproofed the entire room, which is the shower walls, the floor, and including 4 inches up the adjacent walls behind the baseboards, and that's probably excessive. In use, surprisingly, we don't have much splash outside of the shower area around the glass, and even with a typically angled shower head, that's not an issue. Though we do have a rain head as well, which is usually recommended to reduce splashing in this type of situation. I was also worried that the lack of door or open concept shower would mean that showering would be cold, and it turns out this is not the case, even with the high ceilings in the room. We also installed an electric heated floor to aid in drying. I have tested how quickly the floor dries with and without the floor heat, and it does make a difference in the dry time, going from anywhere from 10 to 15 hours down to 2 to 3 hours to completely dry. The floor warming system is also a very nice addition for comfort, and our cat is also a fan. If you'd like us to share more about our experiences with lowering the floor or anything else about this project, we'd be happy to. Thanks.
Thanks. That was awesome.
Nice.
So she did everything right?
What's that?
She did everything right.
Yeah,
They did everything.
and it's a gorgeous bathroom. I'd love to have that bathroom.
It's a major transformation. I mean, it was pretty elaborate bathroom before, and now it's so much more spacious. It looked like they took out a giant jacuzzi tub and put in a really nice understated freestanding tub.
Can I just say they put the drain in the right place instead of near the door? Like that was the problem with the collar she was referencing, right? And collar, I call it collar, that's way harder to do, right? When the slopes to the drain, which is at the edge of the shower, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, don't people put them at the entry because they're in remodels often because of it's an easy way to elevate the floor to get the slope?
Yes. Because they're building up instead of going in, right?
Instead of going in, right. Because otherwise you'd have to have a step at the entry, and that obviously defeats the purpose.
Sure. I mean, we even have that article about that process, right?
That's right.
So,
I guess that I love curbless showers, and I think those drains that you can tile on top of are such an elegant solution, and they just look great, and
it's nice to be in there, right?
It's nice to be in there.
It's nice to be in there. We heard from a number of folks about our discussion about the acoustic treatment of the music studio. It's hog barn to music studio conversion that we talked about in episode 346. Kylie made the point that, you have to treat this space acoustically, but she was using the word soundproofing, and I didn't pick up on this, but a number of listeners did. What Kylie was talking about is discussed by somebody who knows way more about this than I do, Scott. Scott writes in response to podcast number 346, I wanted to give my 2 cents on the soundproofing discussion. I'm an audiovisual engineer and have some background in acoustic design. First, the term soundproofing is a misnomer often used by those who confuse two very different aspects of acoustics, acoustical isolation versus acoustical treatment. In the podcast, it seemed Kylie was referring to the latter and Patrick the former. Acoustical isolation is concerned with the prevention of sound from leaving or entering a space. As this building is out in the country, sound leaving the space maybe isn't a concern unless they are actually recording, and then they might be concerned with outside noise being captured, such as a truck driving by, dogs barking, etc. Mechanical decoupling, mass loading, and extreme air sealing are all involved. Some basic results can be achieved with careful air sealing, mineral insulation, and double-layered drywall with green glue in between. After that, things get difficult and costly, especially with low frequencies like the rumble of a truck driving by. Acoustical treatment deals with how sound propagates within a space, i.e., how does the room sound? Is there low frequency buildup or harsh slapback echo? Treatment is a bit easier to deal with and very DIY-able. An easy approach is to use 2-inch rigid fiberglass panels like Owens Corning 703, attach drywall corner bead to the edges and wrap it in breathable fabric like muslin and hang them on the walls with 2-inch air gap behind them. The air gap increases low frequency absorption and makes them behave more like 4-inch panels. If low frequency buildup is a problem, block off the corner of the rooms with additional panels and pack some mineral wool insulation behind them. If you're framing in the interior of the space, making the walls not parallel is a huge bonus. Think of standing directly perpendicular to a wall and throwing a ping pong ball at it. It comes right back at you. If the wall is splayed, the wall will deflect in a different direction and thus lose a lot of energy by the time it gets back to you. Acoustical theory and treatment can be a rabbit hole, but basic efforts can get some pretty good results. Also, that egg crate foam, even the acoustical stuff, is really only useful for high frequency. The rigid fiberglass is a far superior solution. An important note, sound treatment typically does next to nothing for isolation. You can treat the inside of a room to a great degree, but it will not prevent sound from leaving or entering that space. Another important note, still waiting on my FHB sticker from previously aired questions. My bandsaw is filled up, but there's plenty of space left on my joiner. Scott, I will try and get you one of those out. It's been sticker locked down recently, but I have a lot of catching up to do when I can get back in the office. What do you think? Great input on that subject, eh? So your
sounds
son
like he needs
Sam is
to write an
studying this very
article.
subject, right, Brian? Is it his training move into this realm?
Yeah, I think his program, he studies audio design and production. And so I think that there's certainly an aspect of the program that relates to acoustical design, and he is learning to design systems for different types of installations in buildings or live sound or whatever it might be. Certainly learning how to design music studios and recording booths and that type of thing. Although that's not his passion, so I don't hear nearly as much about that as I do the music side of things. but it's fascinating, and it's all physics. And when I ask him questions, I don't understand his answers.
That means you've done a good job. That was super helpful, Scott, and thank you for clearing that up. Kylie was concerned about her talking about the subject on the show, and she immediately, after we were finished recording, realized that she was using the wrong terminology and wanted to redo the show, but we don't do that. This is from Jay in Atlanta. Hey, FHB Podcast, I really appreciate what all you do. I've listened to all 300 plus hours of the show and don't think I've heard my situation brought up at all on the Fine Air Sealing podcast episodes. My house is located in Atlanta, Georgia, and was built in 1979 with the then popular concept of a vented crawl space. The house has had a number of renovations over the years. The one I am writing about today was completed in 1991. We've lived in the house for 3 years and last year decided to encapsulate the crawl space with 20 mil plastic, 2 inches of closed cell foam, and a dedicated dehumidifier. This significantly changed the comfort of the home. The 1991 addition finished out space in a walkout basement to a pool in the backyard. There was a cedar closet, i.e. 90s cedar flakeboard in the basement that had 2 outside walls. Recently, we decided to turn this indoor closet into an outdoor closet for the kid pool stuff by adding double doors to the outside. We're planning to close up the existing door into the house. So those of you who are listening, you're trying to imagine this. He's got a closet in the basement, right, in a corner of the basement. He's going to cancel off the door that goes into that space, put a door to the outside through the exterior wall of the house with double doors, and then the space will be accessed from the outside. I had seen some water damage in the back corner of the cedar closet, but I'd never experienced water or wet conditions over the last 3 years, so I figured we'd see what was behind it when I updated the closet. While ripping out the cedar, I was delighted to find drywall behind it in great condition. I was cruising for a quick project. Then I opened up the bottom section of the closet, which had a slight bump out for the foundation, and found significant mold, rot, and bugs. Fiberglass bats were used and the 2x4 framing was crumbling from rot. This bump out continues into the finished part of the basement and is one large cavity that I now know is full of mold and rot. Since this basement addition was on the original exterior side of the foundation, there were few areas for HVAC contractors to punch through cinder blocks for supply vents, but they found a spot in this closet to add a supply. Thinking that between the original vented, humid crawl space, conditioned air in the closet, and the large temperature swings here in Georgia, there was a fair amount of vapor drive over the last 30 years that led to the motte and rolled situation. I've attached a number of pictures and a floor plan layout. I need some help, guidance, thinking through what to do now that I have encapsulated the other side of this wall. Okay, 2 questions. How do I treat this foundation before putting up new sheetrock? Can I do closed cell foam on this section of foundation in the closet and then box it in as it was previously done? If not, what do you recommend? So, Brian and I talked a little bit about this ahead of the show. He asked me, what the heck is going on with this foundation? And what do you think, Brian?
Well, I asked you what was going on with the foundation because the photos, it's hard to know exactly what we're looking at. The area that the area that he exposed and has shown us looks like we're seeing some ledge and maybe some concrete. So it looks like maybe sort of, concrete poured around some ledge that was on the property. I'm not sure if we're just reading that photo wrong. I don't know if you agree, Patrick, but it was a bit confusing, the photo.
I kind of agree with you. I think it's ledge with a concrete like stem wall poured on top. And I think as a workaround, they just built the building around this very large piece of stone that was intruding into the basement, which is something you see a lot in old New England farmhouses, but probably not so much in a suburban Atlanta home built in the 90s, right?
I'm not sure that changes the solution, but it was certainly a little bit confusing. What my guess is that what's happening here is not probably not due to vapor drive. It's probably due to air. Just airflow getting behind those walls. And my guess is that he's that's a cool surface. That concrete and that ledge is a cool surface, and wet air is getting to it, and he's condensing, probably then pooling and soaking the framing. That would be my guess. And I'll go right to his question about the spray foam. I think listeners of this podcast know that I'm not a big proponent of spray foam insulation for a number of reasons, but this may be a case where it's a good solution. Yeah. It will give you both that insulating value and vapor control that you need, and air seal that you need in just this situation, and it will apply to that irregular surface, that ledge that we think we're seeing. It's why it's used on rubble foundations a lot as a solution where people need to insulate and take care of moisture issues in older basements with stone foundations. So I think it's probably a good solution. He's gonna have to expose it all, and do the whole thing right.
That's the thing about when you're doing vapor and air control measures. You can't do part of a wall. Like it doesn't work that way. You need to do assemblies, right?
Yeah, you'll just have that problem down the wall a little bit.
Right.
So frame it out how you need to frame it out. Bring in the spray foam contractor. Still use pressure treated plates at a minimum. But you got to keep that wet air one way or another. Got to keep that wet air from.
The other thing at work here is, if anyone who listens to this show should take away one building science fundamental, it's this: that heat moves from more to less, water moves from more to less. The soil has a lot of moisture in it compared to your house. It's always going to be trying to go into to the basement, right? It's going to be constantly conveying right in to that wall cavity because it's still got less moisture, even when things are soaking wet with water. It's still less than is in the ground.
So I got a question for you, Brian, because I've seen examples of this done with the spray foam over a rubble foundation, but would you feel that it needs this sort of the additional level of security of doing some sort of a membrane before you put the spray foam down, because I've definitely seen that done, either a dimple mat or like a peel and stick that spans from the top framing down to the floor, something that you're not relying just on the integrity of the spray foam as your moisture barrier.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things there, right? So I guess the first thing that we should have said that I jumped right over is if there's water leaking in from outside, that's obviously the first thing that needs to be taken care of. Like any basement thing that you're thinking about doing, finishing a basement, water, dealing with moisture in a basement, like the first thing to do is ask, are there water intrusion issues? And if there are, they have to be taken care of first. Nothing else is worth doing until that's done. And so, Rob, if one of the ways to potentially take care of that is to allow it to happen, but control it from the inside. In that case, you could use like a dimple mat or something before you do the spray foam, but you have to have a place for that water to go. So that requires, a perimeter drain. It doesn't help to allow that water to flow to the bottom of the wall if there's nowhere for it to go. It's just going to pool in there. So, I mean, it's a good point. And I think, if there were really, from what I've seen done, if there are no water intrusion issues, it's okay. It seems like it's okay, or these contractors are okay with spraying right against that stone or concrete or combination foundation. But that's a good. It might be a good sort of belt and suspenders approach to also kind of isolate the foam from the foundation with that kind of membrane. It also is a way to keep to do a little bit to mitigate the permanence of the foam.
Mm-hmm.
People often do, I've seen people do like, use spray foam insulation on attic floors, but they'll wrap the joist bays with, tar paper first, to kind of make it so that everything is not glued together. If you have to do a ceiling repair, your drywall is not, glued in place from that spray foam installation. So that's always, sort of food for thought, at least with spray foam. You spray it and you're gluing your house together.
Yep, for sure.
It's polyurethane.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
The strength it has, like, it's how I've put door bucks in stone foundations and field stone foundations. Like, we used to, use Tapcons and these masonry anchors and then go back and spray foam. Well, then we figured out that the spray foam was doing a better job than holding the stuff than the anchors were. So Jay has one more question here. How should I address ventilation in this soon-to-be outdoor closet? Should I keep some supply air flowing to this closet? Yes, because he wants to have it for the pool stuff, right? So your kids are not going to let this stuff dry before they stick it in the closet. You're just going to stick it in the closet, so you want at least some humidity control, or you're going to have the perfect environment for growing mold because you live in Atlanta and you're going to have this wet, small closet, right? So do that. Daniel in Montana, Zone 6. First off, I wanted to say how much I appreciate the podcast. I'm a desk jockey in my 20s that jumps for any excuse to build something myself. I've learned so much from listening to all of your podcasts. I especially enjoy hearing about your own projects and how I'm not the only one that takes forever to finish something. I'm building a 16 by 30 detached garage with 10-foot ceilings this summer in Montana, climate zone 6. My plan has been to frame out the back 8 to 10 feet to heat and insulate that as my woodworking shop to keep my tools from rusting. I've been losing sleep over a couple of details and was wondering if you could help me. I was looking at using zip sheathing to get a quality air seal around the exterior. However, because I'm not insulating or drywalling the ceiling above the non-work section, any method of roof venting will negate any air sealing I do on the exterior. Would this be a good candidate for an insulated, unvented, hot roof, asphalt or metal? Should I just plywood and Tyvek the sides and not worry about air sealing? I'm hoping my wife decides that she wants her car in the heated garage after the first winter so we can drywall and insulate the whole building, but she isn't going for that at this point. I also haven't settled on a heating system. I'm fairly enamored with the in-floor radiant via electric on-demand water heater, but I'm wondering if I should just keep it simple and do electric infrared panels or tube heaters. Natural gas comes to the house, but I would prefer not to have it plumbed to the garage. We live a ways out of town, and the only inspection they do is for plumbing and electrical, but I still want to follow best practice. All right, Daniel. So, Daniel, you can't have an insulated space if you don't have 6, air-controlled walls, right? You can't make a conditioned space without having a top. So if you want to have a conditioned workshop, you're going to have to put a ceiling at least in the part of the space that you want to heat, and you're going to need a wall separating that space from the rest of the open ceiling garage. And when you do all that, you're going to find it's less expensive to just do the whole ceiling and move on with your life, right?
Yeah, I mean, even if he wasn't going to get to, because it sounds like he really wants to get the entire thing closed in, and that's maybe a talk he has to have with his significant other down the road. But I would not plan on doing it the way he wants to do it, and go ahead and do all those air sealing details, even if he doesn't think he's going to get to the garage portion of it until later. There's nothing wrong with that being a vented space if that's not a conditioned space yet. And but like you said, certainly the shop space would have to then be air sealed, and maybe even treat the doorway between the garage and the shop like an exterior door with a weather strip, which is something you might want to do anyway in a workshop or a garage, or adjacent to a garage, right?
I mean, this is going to be an amazing building. Like, why wouldn't you want to be able to use all of it? And being able to park the cars in there and like zone 6 is an added bonus, right? It's when you're making stuff, as anyone knows, you not only need room for your tools, you need stuff to assemble things and put things that are in process, right? Right, Rob?
Yeah. Believe me, I'd be arguing that way, but I wonder if the opposition is arguing that that would be the excuse to kick the cars out of the garage and have more workshop space.
Well, you have to take these in incremental steps. That's where I would be
Yeah.
moving toward.
But to your point, it's going to be more work to do it piecemeal than it would be to just do it all at once.
I think so. And if you can't do it all at once, make the building, get a torpedo heater or some other kind of space heater, and use it when you need it, and then turn off the torpedo heater and go back in the house. He asked about in-floor radiant heat with an on-demand electric water heater, and in-floor radiant heat is lovely, and people who have shops with it, I know, love it, because even an insulated slab is less comfortable than one that's 70 or 80 degrees, right? And that's great, but for a workshop or a garage, these are very occasionally used spaces, and those systems do not respond well to trying to warm the space quickly, right? It has to be on all the time, and you can't just go out there and warm up the space like you could if you had some kind of unit heater or some other forced air source, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And I think that gets at the question that I'd want to ask him is really how often he's going to use this space, and how much he's going to actually keep it heated, because if it's like, we could get into, really great details about how to create a little, box inside this garage and get it air sealed really nicely, and the best, most comfortable heating system. But if it's going to be an occasional use thing,
throw some energy at it.
Do the minimal of effort of insulating and air sealing, and get the heating system that's going to heat it up the fastest. So you can walk out there when you're, before you make your coffee in the morning, and turn on the heater, go back in, have your coffee, come out, and it's comfortable.
That's very much how I used to use my barn. Now it's more conditioned all the time because I'm working here every day. But it's for most folks, it's too expensive to heat that kind of building all the time.
And to build out an insulated building that you're using only occasionally. Like, I mean, we're always the first people to say, "Oh yeah, do the best job you can," but occasional use spaces like this don't always warrant the best job you can do. Like for my little workshop barn out in the back, just putting a drywall ceiling instead of having the cathedral ceiling up to the vented roof. That was enough for me to put a little electric heater out there once in a while, just to get it to take the chill off when I'm doing a project. And I don't ever expect it to get up to 72 degrees and stay that way for hours at a time, but it's perfect for my use.
And you don't really need that, Rob, right? Most people don't. You warm it up to do your work, and then you go back in the rest of the house.
Yep.
So out of curiosity, I looked to see how much electricity a Stiebel Eltron instantaneous electric hot water heater uses. Okay, so the smallest one uses 50 amps, and that's for 1.5 gallons at a 54 degree temperature rise. So the temperature rise referred to what is the temperature of your incoming water, and I can bet you in Montana, it's not going to be very warm in the wintertime. And I think most folks would assume that you want water that's at least 100 degrees so you can comfortably take a shower, right? So if your water's coming in at 40 degrees, this would get you close. But if your water's coming in 30 degrees, or if you want 120 degree water, you're going to need a bigger one. And that takes two 40 amp or two 50 amp breakers. The biggest one, which will do 5.5 gallons at a 55 degree temperature rise, is 3 50 amp breakers. That is 36 kilowatts of power.
So I'll describe to you a system that's an alternative to this that a friend of mine has, but the difference is that he works in his barn working on old cars as a living. So he's in there all the time. And he has it hooked up instead of an electric water heater, he has one of those outdoor wood boilers and tons of dead wood on his property. So, it's labor to get that boiler going and to cut wood for it, but he's not spending money on natural gas or electricity. And so he runs that thing all the time, and he can open the door to his garage to bring cars in and out and leave it open for a while. And it's still comfortable in that shop because it's got this massive heated slab. But that's an extreme situation. And it's also a very unique setup he's got there. But for the occasional use, it just doesn't seem economical.
Daniel, you want an outdoor wood boiler, according to Rob. Which have their own problems, right, Rob? I bet his neighbors aren't too stoked about having the wood boiler.
Well, he's on 9 acres that it backs up to Nature Conservancy property, and so he doesn't really have any close neighbors. But yeah, in Connecticut, there's really tight restrictions now about how close you can be to another house if you run one of those things.
And the reason is, folks, if you're not familiar with these things, is they cycle on and off and damp way down, and when they do that, they are really smoky. And there are a few ones that meet EPA standards now, but that's not traditionally how they've worked. Dear FHB team, we've bought our first standalone home. We're leaving the condo to go to a 1960s brick ranch in PA zone 4/5, and we're going to be renovating. Even though Mom always said a little knowledge is dangerous, I have gone down the building science rabbit hole. It all started with some harmless build show videos, to Lundstrom, to Steebrook, and now to FHB. My goal is to improve this home's air sealing, not so much improve as introduce, followed by insulation. Just to paint a picture of the current state of things, it has attached living space and a garage are directly connected via an open attic. The insulation in the attic are bats lying on top of the ceiling's drywall. There's dampness in the basement from an attached underground room, which is out beyond the foundation and therefore roof. And the exterior is in good condition. There's brick with an air gap, and the sheathing all look good. The basement dampness issue will hopefully be dealt with via bitumen wraps and or a dehumidifier. Regarding the air sealing, I'm leaning towards a liquid apply WRB, e.g. polywall, going down to the studs and sheeting and use polywall on everything on the interior, bottom plates, top plates, sheathing, etc. The interior will look like a blue box. Add insulation, drywall, and done. Forget the open attic, close it. Air sealing the drywall ceiling is a Sisyphean task. If venting the roof decking is needed, I'll put furring strips on the underside of the roof deck, followed with rigid polywall again, and do this down to the knee wall. If venting is needed, I'll add an exhaust fan to the gable vent and or an HRV/ERV. The liquid WRB seems to solve vapor permeability, air sealing, etc. for retrofits. I have not seen this approach mentioned or poo-pooed anywhere. Is this a bad idea, good idea, too wacky? Thanks for any feedback, Grant. Rob, you want to go first on this one?
So I'm just trying to follow. Is he saying he's doing the polywall he's doing on the outside after stripping the entire house out of the house?
No, he's got brick, so he's going to do it from the inside.
So that's right, from the inside. I don't know. It's a little outside of my knowledge area to be doing a liquid WRB on the inside of a house like that. So I might have to defer to our more building science steeped editor Brian here.
Well, we had this question on GBA once, and I forget who. I think I reached out to the folks at Prosico and asked them if they would recommend this use of their product, and I think they said sure, it's fine. So there wasn't, at least with that one company that I reached out to, there wasn't a concern with the product.
Has anyone tested the efficacy of using a spray applied WRB in this manner? I can't imagine it would be much different than putting it on the outside, but it's certainly not on label installation method.
It's not a common use of the product, so I don't think that there's a whole lot of anecdotal or quantifiable kind of data around this. I don't know why you would do it. You could just insulate these walls and use either maybe use a variable perm vapor retarder like the IntelliMembrane, which is a great air barrier when it's sealed, and use that on the inside and then drywall, or do, if you don't want to have any type of vapor retarder, do airtight drywall approach. These are just much more common approaches that work just fine. And if you're going to be taking the wall apart, why not do it like that?
And
So
he's going to have the ability to air seal more conventionally with spray foam or caulk and all these tapes, all these things while the walls are open, right? Like it seems
absolutely, like the bottom and
yeah,
top plates, if he
yeah,
wanted to hit penetrations and whatnot. And also, a lot of if he's really going to gut all the exterior walls, a lot of the work he needs to air seal the attic now he can do from, in the trickiest work at the eaves, he can do from below.
yeah.
So his Sisyphean task all of a sudden just got a little bit easier, because he's doing it from below. The other thing that I wanted to point out about what he said he would air seal the roof all the way down to the knee walls, and I didn't understand something. He's got now a big gap that's unair sealed from the knee walls to the walls. So somehow he's got to make continuity of that air barrier from the knee walls to the exterior walls. There's lots of different details for doing that. Usually requires some blocking in the ceiling below the knee walls. There's other ways though. If you can get behind them, you can just take the air barrier down to the top plate. Those and now the space behind the knee walls becomes part of the conditioned envelope.
I'm a little
sure.
confused because he describes the house as a ranch, but ranches don't have knee walls, like they have eave walls and gable walls, but they don't have shorter walls. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I have seen, in fact, a good friend of mine lives in a ranch that has these knee walls built in the attic, and I'm not sure why. This is not an attic that you could ever use for anything. You cannot stand up even at the ridge line, and it's got these walls built.
Do you think
they
it's
actually
maybe
have any-
to cut the span of the rafters possibly?
That's what I thought it might be, because it's like, it's like a, 60s ranch that has like, crazy long 2x6 rafters.
Yeah.
So you think they're structural? They're not actually walls with any kind of surface on them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder if maybe that's what he has, if that's his situation. But it still doesn't matter. He's got to get that continuity of that air barrier. If he's going to do all this work, don't leave that, few feet of space not air sealed.
Grant, I'm going to tell you before you tear into this project, and I am notorious for getting involved in things that I am not adequately prepared to do, but I think you really need to have an energy audit and figure out where the air movement is in your house and get someone to help you with a blower door direct your air sealing efforts. And I mean, like, if you don't have to rip out all the walls, why would you do it? And most of the time, I'm betting that's not necessary, right? It's more patching than redoing. Is that fair?
I think there's a lot that can be done before you go to that length.
I think it's tempting if you're gung ho about a project like this and you find a product that seems sort of like this something's going to solve all of your air sealing problems, that and you're willing to go the full distance. It's tempting to sort of dig in deep. I feel like we've heard of we've come across other people who have been this gung ho about a project that maybe more than they actually need to do to get the job done.
You could take in the same amount of time, you could take all your possessions out of your house and bring in the air barrier crew.
Yeah, without having to tear open a single wall.
Yeah.
And it's verifiable. Like, what if you do all this work and it doesn't work? You'd have to be doing multiple blower door tests, right, to ensure that your efforts are actually paying dividends before you close up the walls, right? And most folks who are living in a house, and maybe they're not going to be, can't do everything at once. You need to do things incrementally. And so that would be very hard to blower door test in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
Move out, bring an aero barrier.
Yeah, cover your floors and your finishes, and
you can have those like storage trailers brought to your property, right? Or a number of pods, and have them, hold your stuff while you air seal your house. I'm thinking of doing that.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be that big a deal in my house. It's so little.
You're saying to move everything out and do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could move it into the barn. And we could
Rob's free next weekend.
This is why you moved to South Carolina.
He was.
With Patrick's small one-story house, I think he's about the only person who I would definitely volunteer. I'd be like, yeah, no problem. Well, it'd take us like 2 hours to empty that house, right?
And we don't have any furniture. Honestly, it's like, yeah, it's great. Jeff, what do you think about like tearing your whole house apart to air seal? Is that ever make sense for most people?
I can't see how the effort and expense would pay off in any kind of reasonable time.
Yeah.
And there's so many things to compare it against, right? Like compare it against putting in more efficient appliances, including heating, cooling system, covering your roof with PV.
Yeah.
And look at the cost of that. And like, I think it's like, yeah, if you were building new or if you were doing an extensive remodel for other reasons, there's no doubt about it. The first thing you want to do is envelope stuff. Like that's a no brainer. But in an existing house, I think the equation isn't so simple.
Especially with the affordability of PV now, right? That's become the balancing act is, if you can put PV on your house for $20,000 and have most of your energy needs met.
Right.
Yeah. And as long as there's no signs of any major damage from moisture because of the brick walls or problems in the attic, it seems to me like in an existing house, I mean, you could take the air sealing measures from a poorly air sealed older home really far without a whole lot of invasive work. And then, of course, the closer you get, the harder it gets. You're never going to get the passive house level house, but you can certainly make it a hell of a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, depending on what his attic looks like. I mean, he didn't mention if there's if there's floorboards down or whatnot, or but if his attic is an open attic with with insulation in the ceiling, like again, his Sisyphean tasks are totally worth doing. That you should do. You don't have to, you should get up there and crawl around and do the air sealing and add insulation because that is very cost effective work. It's uncomfortable, dirty work that none of us want to do, but it's super cost effective.
And I think you would still need to do that if you used a spray applied barrier. It's not going to like bridge, the 3/4 inch gap that goes around your vent stack. And those are the things that really matter with air tightness, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that attic update is a big important job to do in an older house like that.
Grant, I hope you will keep us informed about what you decide to do, and I'm sure that wasn't helpful at all. He wants to just like tear into his house and.
Well, one more thing about the attic. There's something after you're done banging your head against the roof deck, right, where you're trying to work over at the eaves and busting your knuckles working against the chimney and all that stuff. It's really satisfying to hold that hose and have the cellulose insulation just pump out and fill your attic floor. It really is. It was like one of the most satisfying things of my life when I did that project on my last home.
It is such a good system too, right? Blown cellulose or blown fiberglass does a fantastic job of insulating. Yes, you need a lot of it compared to spray foam and other things, but geez, it just does a fantastic job.
In fact, that's one of the biggest selling points from an energy standpoint of if you're dealing with existing homes of a ranch house, is that give up on using that attic as a storage space, which it's marginally useful for, and just do the most affordable thing you can do, which is fill it full of fluffy insulation after doing a good job of air sealing.
Yeah, just I closed that attic hatch right off, and I put a hatch in the gable end, so I didn't even have to do that like whole tricky detailing of air sealing the attic hatch. And forget about
that's
the attic.
what I did in the vaulted ceiling of the barn too. So I have a section of slope ceiling upstairs, and then I have a little flat ceiling. It's 8 foot wide by 24 feet long, and that must have 30, 36, 40 inches of cellulose in some places, because I guess I just bought too much of it and just didn't know what to do with it. So I just kept putting it in there.
Why not? Fill it up.
That's messy work, though. If you can get the person who's on the outside loading the hopper, do that job.
Honestly, with a lot of the energy efficiency subsidies, you can almost get it installed for as cheap as you can buy the material if you go through one of your local energy audits. Then you could even get a really cheap loan to do it, where it's cost you next to nothing.
Yeah, that's good advice, Rob. It really is, because there is money out there, and especially if you have high utility bills, it's in everyone's interest for you to get your house tightened up.
Take advantage of those programs.
You guys want to say anything before we part company today?
So by the time this airs, we should have our next project guide live, which will be the Windows and Doors project guide. And again, those project guides are, on average, they're usually about a couple hundred articles and videos from our archive, because we have, I think it's about 12,000 articles if you really think about the 40 years we've been publishing. And so just head down to finehomebuilding.com, scroll down the homepage just a little bit, and there's a section where you can find all of our new project guides. And we're coming out with a new one about every month and a half. So hopefully by sometime next year, we'll have all of the major topics that we have in our archives covered, and it'll be a great thing.
Then what will you do?
Go back and make them better.
What do you got to say, Brian?
Well, we've also got the two 2020 FHB houses coming online in the next few weeks. So the first content's going to start to roll out on the website, and one of them is they're both built by FHB authors. One of them is Ian Schwant's home that he's been on the podcast, actually. So listeners probably know.
He's hosted the podcast.
He's hosted the podcast. That's right. So y'all are familiar with Ian, and we're following his build, and we're going to start to have content on that soon. And the other one, we should
say that's Ian's own house. So this
Ian's
is where the rubber meets the road.
Yes.
What is the good builder put in his own house with material costs that are off the charts? It seems like a good premise.
Yeah, and the other one is Jason Malik, who people are probably familiar with too. He's also written for FHB. He's a trim carpenter in Nebraska, and so it's neat because we've got two builders' own houses, and they're both different. You know, Ian's is a little bit smaller. It's just for he and his wife. They're really focused on performance and efficiency, and just a really exceptional kitchen. His wife is a chef, and highly skilled chef apparently, and so they're gonna give her the kitchen that she deserves for her skills, and so that's sort of where they're putting a lot of interior effort, and it's kind of a farmhouse with a unique sort of upside down approach to it because of the views. So really cool stuff happening there. And then Jason's got a family of 7. Jason has 5 daughters, and so he's building a real family house, all the space that they need to be comfortable with 7 people, really nice outdoor space. And Jason being a trim carpenter, this house, we get to focus a lot on really, exceptional interior work. And so hopefully, we're just in the framing stage now. But when we get inside his house, hopefully we're going to be able to bring some content from his expertise. So looking forward to both of those projects coming online.
And you said those will start rolling out soon. When?
Yeah, they're actually going to be live certainly by the time. In fact, the day we're recording, which is a little bit before this goes live, we're actually going to have it live. Some of the first articles and videos.
Yeah, we're sort of, we always are a little behind the actual builds, but Ian's house is framed and dried in and has windows and doors installed, and he's moving on to siding, and then he's going to get inside and start insulating. Jason's house today, I think they're finishing up wall framing. So that project's a little bit further behind.
Those both sound great and right in our wheelhouse.
For sure.
Well, thanks for being with me, guys. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Rob, Brian, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please, please, please like, review us, however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thanks very much for listening.